I can't say this without playing this. The Blue Bible. Hold on.
Now you got a motherfucker born in their own native land and don't got nothing coming to them. You born in debt. They call it money. You born in debt. You need money to get, you get what I'm saying? You're not born in a world where, okay, you got land, this and that, and other, but no one could even imagine it now, but once upon a time you were, everybody was rich. Right. Everybody was born into a nation.
You see it, the Blue Bible, get your copy. And I'm not gonna make y'all wait anymore, no longer. It's been a few minutes. I think I got probably enough people in the room. Hope y'all coming in. I got something very special for y'all. You know, a lot of people like to talk bad about technology, especially when they can't keep up with it. But when you take the same tools that's used against us, and instead of complaining and whining, you take them and use them for us, you get beautiful angels like the brother Cozmo L. I mean, this brother doesn't know I spilled the beans. I got Cozmo L here, y'all. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you a brother like me that's coming from the bottom of the bottom, and you know you don't got no family there, you don't got no friends, and you've been locked up since a kid, and it's basically over. You've basically tapped out and given in to the system. And you see a brother like Cozmo L, he has so many books into so much intricate information that he put hours and hours of study and travel into just to get, and he put it in these small pamphlet forms in different sizes of books. You can get bigger ones, smaller ones. And I had a family member, I was trying to get that book called The Golden Age of the Moors. I think it was like $300 or something. Couldn't get it. Nobody was going to order it for me. They said, well, hey, I got this for you. This guy talks about that Moor stuff. And what came through that door for the mail time changed my life. Peace and blessings to the brother, no other than the master teacher himself, Cozmo L.
Islam, peace, my brother.
Peace. It's such an honor to have you here.
It's an honor to be here, my brother. I think it's very important to support those who are trying to get the message out. So infinite gratitude to you for allowing me to reach your viewers, people that I may have not otherwise been able to reach, and get the information out, my brother.
I want to thank you because me being a person who was on the outside looking in for a long time and studying and reading different teachers, different authors, I can tell, especially being someone who takes the time to put information together for others, that I can ask you directly now that I would imagine you put a lot of time into making the message not so much relatable, but the aha moments, the smoking guns. You go out your way to dig and find them. Would I be correct in that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I searched for information that could answer many of the questions that I heard in high frequency, I heard repeatedly, but that I attempted at least to answer them in a way that would bridge the gap and bring unity as opposed to bringing division. So I searched for quotes, I searched for information that ones cannot deny, that they could go look up for themselves. I give plenty of references because oftentimes when you're dealing with information that can toggle between information like nationality and metaphysics, a lot of times people skip over the references. And I think references are important because you need to build your knowledge on a sure foundation. And that doesn't mean that every reference is true, but it means that there's a foundation to stand on beyond someone's opinion. So that's what I sought to do. And I also sought to make the books readable for the common person, someone who never stepped foot in the temple at all. So that was my intention right
now. Okay. And I know for sure for me, we heard a lot of talk about slavery and what's your stance, but you were the first person I seen that said, man, hey, this is a privilege. This is not a right. We're still voting for that every 25 years and just lay it out. Who can deny that? There's a law here. There's a vote coming up. You're the first one I seen that showed the Treaty of Jaffa. I've been in several, Black conscious community conversations, you know what I'm saying, where they're going and going and going. They're talking about angels. They're talking about Jerusalem. And as soon as I say Treaty of Jaffa, it's like drop the mic. wow, whoa, okay, whoa, you're going deep. And I'm like, man, I got this from Cozmo L about 12 years ago. So these were real, historically sound, factual things, And the reason why I'm so, excited is because I ran into your books before I got to see the Circle 7 Quran, before I got to even know what the Moorish Science Temple was. So I'm like, what is this? You know what I mean? It's just law. It's just straight facts. It's, you know what I mean? So I appreciate that, brother. And
Thank you,
I brought you because there's a topic that, I just dropped in my book and I haven't dropped it yet. That's why I ain't got one to you. I would never do you like that. Put you in the book and you ain't got one. But I'm working on the index right now. I'm gonna have the real official Amazon version and get that over to you. But I've been dropping it. My first couple, Allah told me to get 100 out there. Can you see it? I'm trying to move in a good angle.
Yes, sir.
There we go. So, I never wrote nothing before. So I said, do 100 physical ones and get them into people's hand and then go from there. So in doing that 100, I've done some edits. I've learned about size, you know what I mean? And I've already got rid of about 70. I'm between 60 and 70 right now. And then those people reaching back out to me, there's a lot of questions about when I talk about the Albions being enslaved. And I try to explain to people that when we get in, why I put so much emphasis on using etymology and the wording is I see it as a brainwashing going on here, because the word slave and the concept of slavery, a slavery time, and the so-called 400 years that we hear about all the time, right? Mm-hmm. It seems like before we even get into the discussion of it, anybody I know that has a darker hue to them automatically believes that's automatically talking about them. That's automatically talking about their family. As a matter of fact, in any period of time, we were, and we probably will be again, the slaves.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the
yes, indeed.
lock, right? And what I tell them is, before I argue with you for 5 hours and give you all these dates and times, and we sit here and yell, can we look at the simple fact that the word itself comes from Slav, and it became the title because before we fell into that, there was like 1,000-year span of the Slavic people being put into these, this servitude, actually selling themselves a lot of the times. I found in my investigation, right? So this is how this word became affiliated with their whole people. Now, it getting to us is based on the concept of 400 years. Now, I teach about that all the time with the Gullah Geechee, did slavery happen? So the point I'm trying to make here, I don't want to keep going, is that, brother, I went and got Chat GPT, Chat AI. You up on artificial intelligence? I went and got some artificial intelligence, and it still couldn't give me no details, no names. I found 1 million books about quote unquote black slavery, this so-called 400 years, but I couldn't find nothing of this long ass 1,000 years of the Albions, right? It almost went to damn near arguing. It went to arguing with me damn near. Like, as I asked it, I will give it names like Yaqub al-Mansur fought 300,000 Christians. Oh, hey, we don't have any details on that, or, So I brought a master teacher like yourself so we could try to delve into it,
Praise Allah.
So let's go. White slaves in Morocco with Cozmo L. So right here in page, I hate trying to hold this to the camera. I swear it never works. Y'all get y'all blue Bibles out in page 43. Now you can verify this for me. I say Idris the First of Morocco was Sharif, and it's spelled different, right? You have like Sharif, which I believe is like the European, which from there it went down to sheriff. Then you have in the original, kind of like with Muslim and Muslim.
Mhm.
Is that the
Mhm.
same with like Sharif or Sheriff?
So the word sharif is derived. I mean, the word sheriff is derived from sharif.
Okay.
Not it may not be etymologically have the same root, but they are definitely cognate in a sense and related to one another historically.
So I put
The sheriff served what the sharif would serve, and you can go back to Robin Hood and those days and times. A lot of times the European created titles to mirror titles of our nobility, like the al and the il when you get into Spanish language or el modo latin, so on and so forth. So you wouldn't be wrong in making that assessment.
okay, 100%. I'm glad you brought the L and the L too, because I'll get on that. How I saw it as you see the L right in the what'd you call it? Latin
Uh,
Moreno.
or Latin, basically Moorish Latin, Spanish,
Okay,
what they call Spanish.
and then when you go to the west, I see it become El, and when you go to east, far east, I see it become Il, and then you come back to the center, I see it as Al.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to go with that linguistically, but just suffice it to say that the al as a definite article, because ill and al do have a meaning aside from being the or a definite article. As the definite article is concerned in English, the ill would be derived from the al, meaning the basically the definite, given it and it becoming a title as well. Because anytime you say the, it's something that's well known, right? If I say the book, we all know which book we're talking about. If I say a book, it can be any old book. So it becomes a designation and a title to outline a specific post. But yeah, those two are related.
Okay. So I put Idris the first of Morocco was Sharif of the direct bloodline of the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him. The Sharif, spelled Sharif, I'm saying that for a reason, I'm gonna show it on the screen, are legally both Hassanid and Fatimid, while culturally Shia. Would you agree with that?
Say it again.
The Sharif, because they're the direct bloodline of the Prophet,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
They're
Well,
they're both,
yes. This is true. This would be true. Yes.
so they would be Hassanid, that means descendants of his grandson Hassan, and or Fatimid. So
Yeah.
they had separate, they had different kingdoms.
So we have to understand this though, that Fatima is the mother of Hassan. So it's still the same bloodline, right? Um, Again, you have another term known as Sayyid. A Sayyid is also a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, through Hussein, the other son of Fatima, peace be upon her. So you're still dealing with the same bloodline, although you might be dealing with different schools. As it says, the Hassanids are culturally Shia. The Sayyids would have probably been cultural Shia, but today are more culturally Ahl Sunnah, so to speak. So, or follow the Sunnah of the Prophet. So, but it's all still the same bloodline in relationship to the Fatimids, the Hassanids, and the Husainids, so to speak.
Okay. So after that, I put the people of Adam use the
Yeah.
term Sharif, as in with the other spelling I'm about to show, to pose as descendants of the prophet and enforce laws on us. In their English tongue, the title became sheriff.
Islam again. Uh, the sheriff. So let's go back to sheriff in English. When you look at the sheriff now, that's pretty much what probably comes to people's mind. They think of the sheriff that comes and knocks on your door when you late on your rent or
I can't hear you. I can't hear you for some reason, Mo. I can't hear you. Unmute your mic, Mo. Your mic isn't connected.
sorry about that. It looks like it lost
Yeah.
connection to my mic.
It's
But
good.
what I was saying was that in order to understand the sheriff, today when we look at the sheriff, we think of the one that knocks on the door when people get evicted or you go to get a service from them. But when we look back, saying the story of times of Robin Hood in the so-called Middle Ages or Dark Ages, you'll see that who was his main enemy was the Sheriff of Nottingham, right?
Yeah.
And so the role that he had was a totally different role than what is outlined. It was still similar. In his case, he was abusive, but it was basically like the mufti of the kingdom, the one that saw that the governor, military type of science. So again, that term and that role does morph over time, coming from the sharif to the sheriff to the sheriff that we see today.
So in the original times, it was a descendant of Muhammad through his daughter Fatima entitled to wear a green turban or veil. So these would be
Veil,
like the elite.
yes.
Yeah, the veil part stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
from them, right, I talk about, because like I said, it was your readings where I first went into the legal grounds of what the Holy Lands in Jerusalem and all that, right? So in this era, the whole intro right now was just to establish to people when we're talking about Hassanid or Fatimid, so y'all don't get lost as we're going, because we're about to go in. We're talking about the direct descendants. And I think that's very important. I know for me and people like me who were anti-religious and studying real hard, it was like throw the baby out with the bathwater. You feel me? So it's like, oh man, that's Islam. That's Arabs. I don't need to hear that. But it's like, but who are the Arabs, brother? Who are these first Islamic people? Who are these first Muslims? Did you realize? I know this was the big bomb dropped on me. Everything I was reading about in Islamic history that was seeming so grand and great that they were showing me from the Turks was about 1300 up. Everything right after the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, was in Africa, starting from Egypt on after. You know what I mean? And in Jerusalem and all that, all the stuff that we like to study so much about. So
and this goes back to what some would call the split in Islam between the Sunni and Shia after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. There was a suffice it to say some disagreement as to who would be caliph, and as a result, many of the descendants of the Prophet who disagreed with the present day leadership at that time began to be persecuted. Now, this is very important because, like you said, who were the original Arabs? The original Arabs are not the pale people that you see today. People have to understand that the city of Mecca was started by Abraham and an Egyptian, an ancient Kemetic woman from Africa, from Egypt, known as Hagar or Hajar. And to this day, she's her tomb is in the sanctity of the Kaaba. You can't visit the Kaaba without rotating around her tomb. So back in the day, the Arabs were known as Swarthi, and it was actually because of this persecution at that time, many of the descendants of the Prophet fled to Africa. Now, this was not the first time that they fled to Africa. They actually fled to Africa. The Prophet Muhammad fled to Africa himself to seek refuge with the Grand Negus at that time, the Ethiopian king, from the persecution of the polytheists and the pagans in Mecca. So there was always, since the inception of the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad, there was always a relationship with our brothers and sisters in Africa. And when, after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died, that relationship was further solidified by descendants of the Prophet seeking refuge in Africa being accepted, and Islam being the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad being a structure that was accepted by our people in West Africa, and which is where they fled to at that time.
Now that's very big that you mentioned West Africa too, because I was going to get into that next. But yeah, how even in the earliest times in the seventh in the 7th century and even in the 8th century, going back to 711, that's how we were already leaving from Africa into Europe by then. And you already had Musa ibn Nasir and Ifriqiya, but then you had Islam. See, this is what they don't talk about. I can name 2 major empires that were not ruled by Muslims, but had Muslims as the masses of their residents, of their members, of their people. The Ashanti Empire, and that's later though. That's going to the 1800s. Now let's go back way to the earliest times. The Ghana Empire. The Ghana Empire is recorded as having a lot of different, Arabic and Muslims and different people who started the culture that gave it its grandeur in the earliest years. And the whole point of me even bringing all this up before I even delve into this is that these bloodlines, because some of y'all may hear these names and hear these dates and times and say, oh man, you're talking about some little Arabs. No, if you get to the right time and you establish the right bloodline and what's being discussed here, we're talking about the real Moors. Okay, now.
That's right.
Now, I don't even want to show this though before I even go any further, because like you said about the mixture. Check this out, Mo. I found this and it said it was hard for me to find this picture. This took me about an hour. Remember about that hour where you was kind of like, what's going on, Mo? About 2 something. So that's what I was doing, right? The Fatimid Caliphate, I've never seen it this big. They never show it this big. So I said, whoa. And what I realized is at the same time that the followers of Muhammad, the Prophet, peace and blessings upon them, were actually organized and going into Africa, like you said, when they went into Africa to take back Egypt from the Romans. When they took back Egypt from the Romans, there was another group above them called the Khazars that had Muslims, Jews, all of that they linked with. I didn't know this history, so I'm glad I got you here. So they had the Khazar Cognate, if I'm pronouncing that right. Now, a cognate means they're under the Khans, right? They were Mongols. So you had the Khazar Mongol cognate up there, and then you had the Fatimid Empire going through northeast Africa, and all the way down to a city called Sao Tome in West Africa down there, which I didn't know. So this was a map that was hard to find, but this was like the full extent. They said they actually had a time where they occupied France as well. This is the Fatimid era. This is in the earliest stages of Islam. Feel me?
Islam.
So
they don't teach about the the rise of Islam in Africa the way that they should. A lot of times, a lot of authors, early authors that we respect or that the conscious community respects, have a higher view of Islam than the ones today.
Yes.
Edward Wilmot, it's a very good book. I believe it's called Islam, Christianity, and the Negro Race. This book was known as the Bible of Garvey, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey utilized this book, carried this book, read this book. And, he has some interesting things to say about Islam. I think we have to understand, number one, it mirrors Christianity. Islam doesn't mirror the religions of the West. They're founded by different people and for different purposes. And that Islam did not start in Arabia, which is a misnomer. Islam developed in its later stages in Arabia, but Islam developed all the way from the Adam on up. And even before that, if you want to look at it metaphysically, it even began when the first thing came into submission came into existence by submission to the will of the Creator, then that's when Islam began. And so Islam is universal harmony with the divine nature, with the physical nature, the mental nature, and the divine nature of man. And this goes all the way back to Kemet, and we could go into that, and even before that, we could, eventually go into that as well.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about Kimmy because a lot of brothers like to focus there, right? And I always tell them, I say, well, if you want to focus on Kimmy, what happens after the Romans come? You throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, the Arabs, the Arabs. No, 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 no. Because now we're going to figure out who were these Arabs. Let's start looking at the bloodlines and stuff, right? Because I found something very interesting, but I want to read this first. It's gonna be live when it airs, so there's people coming in the room and all that. Make sure y'all hit the like button. I know y'all see Cozmo L in here. Y'all gotta give an extra like. Send this to your grandma, to your sister, your auntie, and all that. We got them in here, y'all. It's real. Check this out. All right, page 47 of your blue Bibles. Get your blue Bible. Let me make sure I hold that to the screen. Can y'all see it? And make sure y'all order copies, man. This is not a book. This book ain't gonna save your life with one copy. You're gonna need 2 or 3 copies so you can give it to your auntie, your uncle. Y'all can argue over the stuff that says in here and all that. You know what I mean? It's just like the Bible. You want to have one on your nightstand, one in the kitchen, one in the hotel. You know what I mean? You want to let them know. And okay. So before I drop this on y'all, I gotta let y'all know justice is here. Okay. Now we got that out the way. I want y'all to look at that map up there, y'all. Now I don't want y'all to run around and tell everybody the Fatimid was this big. We're letting y'all know. So y'all gotta learn about how he said Islam is not a set thing. A lot of religions have you set in one place, and what happened at this time. You don't understand how science evolves and moves and deals with the time of the time, the science of the time. So that is the Fatimid at its full extent. They ruled for centuries, and there was a point in time where they had this much going on. And that's together with the Khazars. That's not the Fatimid didn't go all up in, that's together with the Khazars right there, the Mongols. A lot of y'all never looked at the Mongols, Ahmed Khan, the Mughal, the Mughal Empire in India. Y'all never looked at the Khans as being one with us too. That concept of Asiatic black man, that's real, y'all. Don't play with it. We are the Asiatics. Now, we're talking about at this time, right? This would be the 12th century, 1100s. In Jerusalem, the knights became, well, let's go back because we're talking about the earliest years. So this is after maybe about 4 centuries after the prophet. In Jerusalem, the knights became drunk with power. To challenge the Moors, they taught that the pentagram was the symbol of the devil, that the prophet Jesus was a deity, and that his body belonged to the church. In response, General Saladin was sent to squash their rebellion and take Jerusalem back. His mission was complete with the signing of the Treaty of Jaffa. He was sent by the Fatimids. So I think that's important because this lets people know too that his name became big and there was a dynasty after him, but he was sent by the Fatimids. You feel what I'm saying? He was sent by the actual bloodline. 935 to 1250, this is in Egypt, was controlled by dynastic rulers, notably the let me see it. Hold on, let me read this up here. Notably the Ikishidids, the Fatimids, and the Ayyubids. Throughout these dynasties, thousands of Mameluke servants and guards continued to be used and even took high offices. So it goes back to like how you were saying, Mo, we wasn't racist. We didn't do all that. We didn't even call it slavery because slave is their name. Our form of servitude, you could get a high office, you could your family still, you know what I mean? You could even become a king.
Yeah. That's right.
The Mamelukes were essentially enslaved mercenaries. They were hired to go to war, kill people and stuff. Originally, the Mamelukes were slaves of Turkic origin from the Eurasian steppe. But the institution of military slavery spread to include Caucasians, Abkhazians, Georgians, Armenians, and Russians, as well as people from the Balkans, such as Albanians and Southern Slavs. Now, The funny thing about this is, this is not saying they were whipped and hung from trees. It's saying that they came into power and ruled a dynasty. You see what I'm saying? So
Islam. Yeah, true. Because, and that's another thing. If we go back to Edward Wilmot Blyden, he has a quote in the book that I referenced earlier, where he says, "When you become a Christian, no amount of adherence to the faith will allow you to become an equal with the European Christians. However, when one joins Islam and takes up he's allowed to take up the sword, defend and participate, and reach higher levels of power as any other Muslim." And that this was a clear distinction between the systems of slavery. And again, I think it goes back to, we have a cognitive understanding of what slavery is based on our colonial education and based on our experience. But slavery in ancient times was nothing like the Atlantic slave trade. And I'll leave it there because I want to save some for as we progress to when we're dealing with the European slave trade.
okay, I think that's smart too. That's perfect. So let's stop right there, right? Because now we finally made it to the Crusades. Now here's the big thing I'll say. I'm not gonna say act like I've read all your books. I'm just Cozmo L at the game all day, every day. Like I said, the main thing of all, I've read a lot of stuff though, but the main thing of all your teachings that grabbed me up and shook me was that from the first book that slid into my prison door from you, and you were talking about the Crusades, you brought the Treaty of Jaffa. It finally brought that moment of the Crusades and how they flipped everything. It made it apparent to me. It said, oh, I never even knew who they were fighting. I automatically assumed they were fighting people who were against God, whoever God, you know what I mean? Like this, like there's no explanation of the other side. I search high and low through Islamic records, but I don't really find the name Bey and all that and Ali a lot until you're dealing with the time of the Crusades and the Turks and the Egyptians and the Fatimids and the Hassanids fighting them. Why are these Beys and Alis of the house of Al-Bayt, the direct bloodline? This is when I said, wait, hold on. That's why they dress like that? That's why the Moors is dressed. So this ain't no cartoon movie shit where they just try to look fly and say, this is the, right? I even with the Fez hat, right? I said, well, why are they Ali and Bey? And I see that name in Egypt a lot, and with the Mamelukes and them a lot. But then I see the name, but I see the Fez hat way over here. Then I had to learn about how the Fez hat was outlawed by the Turks, how it was in Egypt and Turkey the most because they adopted it, and it was like a war helmet. Yeah. I mean, it just gets so deep, bro.
Yeah. I deal with that in my book, The Secret of the Fez. You know, a lot of people want to trace the Fez back to the Turks, not realizing that they adopted it as a part of their military uniform. And actually, as a result of that, spread a lot of terror throughout the world and throughout lands and helped to dirty the symbol of the Fez in a lot of areas. Like, say, for example, in Azerbaijan and other places, they can't stand the Fez. Fez is a symbol of terror to them. In the Congo, the colonial, and in other various places in Africa, I believe mostly under the French, colonial uniforms included the Fez, and our people were forced to do things that they didn't want to do. Just like in America, we was forced to whip each other. We didn't want to do it, but we were forced. We were dominated at that time. And so you'll have those in the community that'll say, see, the Fez wearing people, they're the ones who did all of this. But that was after the fall, and we were subjugated, and we were under the orders and directions and colonization of others. Not when we were in power. We had a totally different stilo. So it's very important. And I like to make that analogy. Yeah, you know, we had house servants over here. When you got whooped by the slave, you knew he was just an extension of the slave master's hand. You didn't blame the slave and go try to kill him afterwards, because you knew he had no more power to say no than you had the power to say no. And so when you're dealing with these French colonial uniforms and soldiers, you're dealing with the same dynamic. And that's very important to point out.
A 100%. I don't know what happened there. So check this out. Like you said, the time of power. So they look at the feds and say, no, that's bad. And like you said, well, that's you're talking about the 1800s. You're talking about you're talking about, and
That's right.
not even because in the 1800s it was quote unquote bad. Like you said, they adopted our outfit. We were still wearing that as well in the 1800s. You feel what I'm saying? They adopted our outfit.
They adopted it, but again, not only that, they made it a part of their colonial uniforms in Africa, so that when they forced the soldiers to do these things, horrendous acts, the affairs became associated with it psychologically. Again, the people knew that the people wearing the fez were merely extension of French colonialists and other colonialists. And so to make the argument that look what these people are doing and it's a Moorish symbol is just ludicrous, because like you said, that's the 1800s. That's well after the fall. And that's not what Moors contributed to civilization when we were in power.
And this is the perfect place to bring the Constitution. Let's put some dates to this, Mo. So, Act 6 of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, says, with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are a part and parcel of this said government, and know that they are not, repeat, not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live in the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained Noble Drew Ali, the prophet, to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Now, I think that clears everything up, because right there we got Moabite. So we don't got to just say African. No, he's talking about a specific group of people that went to a specific place. And if I'm not mistaken, it said who inhabited. See, a lot of brothers will read that and say, see, there go the slaves right there. He said it was some Africans, north and west. No, it said that there were Moabites. We were descendants of the Moabites who inhabited northwestern, southwestern shores of Africa. So we've been traveling back and forth. We're going to get to that right now. You know what I mean? But we've been traveling back and forth from those shores for before the great earthquake that caused the Atlantic, as you like to say. You get what I'm saying? Like, we can go all the way deep into this, Mo. So
it's the point I'm trying to say. A lot of people think about, when you think about the Moabites and you look to Jordan, right? Or Levant, that area over there in the Holy Lands, in the east. And so when you look over there right now, you see, more paler type people. They still have some of the darker ones there, but you see more pale. We have to first understand that we're the original people all over the earth. And since the European has been ruling, he's been making everything pale. So you go back far enough, you're going to find the indigenous population, the darker population. But what happens is an ancient migration takes place from that area to West Africa. And this is what Noble Drew Ali talks about in chapter 47 of the Circle 7 Quran, the Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America. He says that the ancient Moabites from the land of Moab received permission from the Pharaoh of Egypt to settle and inhabit Northwest Africa, and that they migrated there along with their Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite brethren from away from the Holy Lands, seeking new homes. And so since this ancient migration, this population of Moabites, Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, so on and so forth, have been in West Africa. And so are you indeed African, in the sense we know Africa is not the name of that, but they've been there for thousands of years, along with other tribes. You know, you find the tribe of God there, you find the tribe of Dan, you find so many different tribes. You even find the language, the Moabite language in Benin and Togo. So, or a language called Moab at least. So we have to understand this ancient migration took place, and there's a lot that happened. So, you know, there's a lot that happened in between that ancient migration from the time that the people in that area came to power in the era in which we're talking about, which is the Islamic era. Prior to being Islamic, most of the tribes and nations in that area were Hebraic or Jewish. And if you get the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, he talks about this, and he also clears up some of the misnomers about Islam being spread by the sword in West Africa. And he talks about how many of the Hebraic kingdoms or Jewish kingdoms that existed, it was their king or their sovereign that became Muslim and took Shahada. And as a result, in Africa, you know, when your king does a thing, the whole kingdom becomes that. So by the king accepting Shahada, the subjects became Muslim as well. They accepted the faith and accepted it as a national faith. And this is not anything that is unusual in Africa. Likewise, you know, we have to differentiate between the Arab Zionist and the actual Arab Muslims or Muslims, because there's a difference. And when the conscious community, so-called black community, are talking about how Muslims did this and how Muslims did that, it's really Arabs who did this and Arabs who did that. And it's a specific kind of Arab. It's a Zionist Arab. We understand about the Zionist Jews. Well, basically how they use Judaism, how the European used Christianity to oppress and to be a superior race. You have Arab Zionists that did the same thing. And these were the self-same folks who chased the descendants of the prophet, the swarthy dark descendants, Qurayshite descendants of the prophet, into Africa a second time.
Okay, that's perfect. So we see right here, in all these times we're talking about, we're still around Egypt. So you see the Moabites were further to the west. Like how you said, they kept having to migrate west, west, west. So now we see a group of people actually calling themselves Almoravide. Not saying that this is the totality of them, but here goes a dynasty called Almoravide, the Moabites, in a time that the Islamic empires in Egypt and around it were thriving. They had to migrate west. Right? The term Almoravide comes from the Arabic Al-Morabite through the Spanish Almoravide. The transformation of the B in Almoravite to the V in Almoravide is an example of Beticism in Spanish. I don't know what that word means, Beticism. Almoravid etymology, Muslim Berber horde from the Sahara, which founded a dynasty in Morocco and conquered much of Spain and Portugal. The name is Spanish from Arabic Almorabitum, literally the monks living in a fortified covenant, from Ribat fortified covenant. Now here's the funny thing about it, Mo. You know what I read? I read that the Moabites are the Chinese. Right? I said, oh my God, what are they doing with our knowledge? Right? The Moabites, a Mohammedan sect. This is from a whole nother source. Moabites, a Mohammedan sect found chiefly in Africa. They were founded about the 8th century by Muhammadin, the last son of Hussein, who was the grandson of Muhammad. They live in sequestered places like monks, either separately or in small communities, are very licentious in their habits and follow many practices utterly opposed to the Quran. So these are people who were around the time when the Sunnah wasn't as established. They don't wear the big old beards and the rough clothing. They dress nice and keep their head shaved like monks. And check this out. This is how confused people are about who they are. Check this out. from the Hebrew Israelite
Verse
creed.
37, for every head shall be bald.
Every head shall be bald,
And every beard clipped.
and every beard of them clipped.
Upon all the hands shall be cuttings. And upon the loins sackcloth.
So it's talking about Moab. Read on.
There shall be lamentation generally upon all the housetops of Moab, and in the streets thereof. For I have broken Moab like a vessel wherein is no pleasure, saith the Lord.
So the Lord said he's going to break Moab down. He also says in verse 37, for every head shall be bald and every beard clipped. Let's show that. This goes into their religions. They have customs where they bald their head. Okay. Yeah, they call them monks. Give me the next picture, Elisha. This is what they do. This is what they do. A lot of y'all, grew up, Wu-Tang brought a lot of black people back to that. Next picture. They bald the head.
Other school that was abomination to academia. There was no time, no dates, no names. He said that their heads are shaved bald like monks, so they're Chinese monks. F it. See, this is what our people do.
Let me shed a little light on that. There is a connection. The connection is the Songhai dynasty and the Shanghai dynasty. If you notice the Songhai dynasty in Mali, they wear a hat known as the Fulani. Right? We call it a Fulani. You notice in the Shanghai dynasty, they have the same type of hat. You notice they have the same robes and thobes, so on and so forth. Now, there's relation there. Recently, the Europeans, the Chinese have done genetic tests to show that they are indeed descendants of those who are considered African. When you look at Burma and you look at South Africa and some of the cultures around there, you'll see the same wearing of the neck rings up to the neck. You'll see the same dances. You'll see the same ceremonies, just a little bit lighter. So there's a lot of connections between some of these things, just like you see the big plate lip in Oromo Valley and those areas over there. And then when you go in the Amazon, you see the same plate lip.
Yeah.
So the thing is, these ancient migrations, right? And culture being carried to certain places. So there is connection between certain kingdoms, but that doesn't necessarily mean wholesale all of the people are that same thing. So that is one thing that is I like to point out to people, that there are certain connections that you can find, because the Moabites we were a seafaring people. So we traveled all around. Another word for Moabites is Phoenician, Carthaginian, right? So we traveled around different areas, spreading the culture through the commerce. So you're going to find Moabite culture all over the planet. It's just a point of being able to identify it. And, seeing there's connection between the monks, and even you'll see back in the Chinese, you'll see some of the fezzes. They're wearing fezzes, right? They have their own type of conical fez, some of the monks. So we're Asiatic people. So you're going to find connections between Africa and Asia. But to get that specific Moabite bloodline, look into the Mali Empire, the relationship between Shanghai and Songhai.
Okay. So what I want to do is place a time period on all of this, because I see a lot of dudes, when I talk about with this, they get the time periods mixed up. They'll talk about Moabite. They talking about maybe the Bible. They're not understanding the difference between that and the Almoravid or Almoravids. Oh, it's the same people. Okay. You know what I mean? Or maybe we're talking about the Ishmaelis, you know what I mean, dealing with the Egyptian, the Fatimids, and the ones that were Ishmaeli, and they're talking about the Ishmaelites in the Bible. And I'm like, no. Right? So even though there may be a relation and connection, we got to get these time periods down, because then you can understand why you're seeing the different phenotype. Some of these people did not get captured or killed. Some of them had sex with enough different types of people that they're still right in front of you, just look different.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that's something that I think that's the biggest science I learned from Moore's science, the science of genetics, that a lot of our brothers and sisters have not captured yet. You know,
Islam.
when you
Well, I like to start time frame wise around the 4th and 5th century. See, the term Moor goes way back. It's ancient. You know, Hannibal was referred to as a Moor by the Greeks and the Romans as a Mar. It was Hannibal and the quote unquote Carthaginians, which is another name for Moabites, who went in Spain the first time and helped raise up the various Gothic and Visigothic cultures that were in that were in Spain at that time. The second time that the Moors were coming was around 711, and it's a couple things I want to point out about that. Number one, the first to go over was not a Muslim, it was a Hebrew by the name of Tarifa. 1 year before Tariq, the Spanish had been calling the Moors. And Tariq came over later, and from that point, Hebrews and Muslims lived in peace and harmony in Spain and in West African kingdoms. We didn't have that dichotomy, that war between us like that. Number two, when people talk about Egypt, people seem to, again, with the timelines, they jump back thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
yeah.
So what happened in between those thousands and thousands of years up until now? So let's just take what George G.M. James says in Stolen Legacy. He says that in the 4th and 5th centuries, that the last Egyptian and Greek schools were closed by Roman emperors Theodosius and Justinian. All right. So, and he also tells you that the Egyptians, who were preserving the Kemetic mysteries and religion and science at that time, where did they go? They went up into West Africa, namely Mauritania. And that it was the Mauritania Moors who preserved the Egyptian and Kemetic science. Now, a lot of people can't reconcile that. They say, well, they were Muslim. How were they preserving the Egyptian and Kemetic science? Well, you answered your own question. When you look at Islam, you're looking at the culmination of the ancient monotheistic religion, which began in Egypt and even before that, and which was culminated in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So when you look at the rituals of Islam and you look at the rituals of Kemet, many of them are the same. The prayer, the positions, the even words like tuwa and dua. This position right here that you see that the Muslims do, the Muslims do, this comes from Egypt. The prayer, all the positions come from Egypt. Many of the words, Arabic is a descendant language of the Kemetic language. It holds all the sounds of Kemetic language, and it's an abjad. It's still arranged in the original upper, or what they call Sinaitic, a little known Kemetic script, which is from which all the modern Latin-based alphabet, English, and all of that come today. So we have to understand that right after this, 4th and 5th, centuries, 600s, you have the Prophet Muhammad, the 500s, between the 500s and 600s, you have the rise of Islam, the Prophet of Muhammad, peace be upon him, being born in Islam, starting to come into fruition. And then less than 100 years, now you have the Moors of Mauritania, who were preserving the Kemetic sciences, who now have linked up with the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and understand and see this faith as a culmination, and that's something that can be utilized to unify and to spread the kingdom. And they actually adopt it, they use it, they begin to, in Spain, translate all of the Kemetic literature that's left, that wasn't burned, that wasn't hidden. And as a result, you see Spain becoming New Egypt, or the center of light and enlightenment of the world. This is all in continuity. You don't have to jump back thousands of years to find out who preserved the Kemetic science and who spread it throughout considerable portions of the world after Egypt fell under another name, albeit, and not the exact replica, but a culmination of it. And a scientific, not only just the religion and the spirituality and the mysticism, but the science. You cannot deny that the science was reintroduced and the light was given again to the world. All of this by the Moors, And, it's something that you would think that would be taught in any so-called Black history class. But yet again, it's not really Black history, because Black history begins with slavery. We know about the Atlantic slave trade, but we know little about the Black Sea slave trade that began thousands of years ago, that the Moors inherited when they came to power. And as a result of some of the Moors not doing the right thing in regards to this trade that they inherited, it contributed largely to our fall.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I want to also add this too, that I've been really trying to get into people's head that we got to stop doing this thinking in absolutes, right? Like, because it's in an area, everyone there is of this same phenotype, is of this same culture. So as soon as you hear the word African, although there's a million Africans that look different ways, they think if someone looks like me, they think of him being a slave or poor, even if he's not enslaved yet, maybe he's hopping out of a tree or something. You get what I'm saying? So what happens is they get away with on the internet always acting like everything in the trans-Saharan slave trade was all Moors. You get what I'm saying? As opposed to the millions of Caucasians. Well, I'll say thousands of Caucasians. No, I can say millions because they were bringing in thousands for hundreds of years. So the millions of Caucasians imported in, the millions of Turks imported in, the millions of Persians imported in, you know what I mean? And that's why I started with Jerusalem, but on that same page 47, grab y'all blue Bible, we go back, it says 200 years before Saladin, the Lord Abu Mansur al-Hakim bi Amir Allah ordered the infamous destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, this was big to me because I was always taught about the Crusades starting with the Christians. And they're always seen as the big victors and the big conquerors. Sometimes they even apologize and say, oh, we're sorry for what we did to your people. Ha ha. But I never heard of us ever dominating anything until I had to dig into this. And I said, whoa.
Well, that time is very important, because when you look over in Palestine and you look over at what's going on right now, and you see the Zionist Jews over there, and you see the Palestinian plight, and then a lot of us will join. My battery's getting a little low here, so I'm going to plug it in real quick, just to make sure we don't run out. But you have a lot of people, and they can understand the plight of the Palestinian, right? But what they don't understand is that there's not only the Treaty of Jaffa, but in the 1200s, there's also a land grant that is granted to the Moors by Salahuddin's family for helping to defend the Holy Land and in Jerusalem. And so there's a large portion of land in Jerusalem that was given to the Moors, including graveyards, vineyards.
And hold on, let me cut you off. In the treaty,
even a gate. Go ahead.
In the treaty, I said in the treaty, they're not called Moors though, right? They're called what? This was the one I learned from you.
In the Treaty of Jaffa?
Yeah, they're called Al-Maghrebis, right?
No, this isn't a treaty. This is a land grant.
But I'm saying they're called Al-Maghrebi.
No, it's Moors. Like, this is given to the Moors. It's in the book. If you get a chance, look up Moors Gate, because it includes Moors. Moors have their own entrance to the holy city to this day. All you gotta do is look up Moors Gate, and so this property. Now you say, well, this is the 1100s, right? All right. How does it have bearing on today? Well, check this out. In the 1800s, the Rothschilds went to the UN and put in a proposal to try to take this land from the Moors, this land grant, or then the League of Nations was the 1900s. The League of Nations refused it and said, no, this land belongs to the Moors. So the status quo was established that this belongs to the Moors. Chap Wiseman, a known scientist, sent a study to the League of Nations, said, well, we just want to study what it would look like if we did it. And again, they was like, no, this is not cool. Right after that, the Britain, America, and whoever else it was went in there and they took the land. The first, how you see the homes bulldozed today of the Palestinians and stuff, the first 600 homes to ever be bulldozed in Jerusalem, in that area, were Moorish homes. That was all Moorish land, and we were forced out. Then, once they forced us out of there, then they begin to expand to the West Bank. Then it becomes this big Palestinian issue, right? But nobody talks about the land of the Moors that was there. You can look up Moorish Street in Jerusalem. It's called Davis. That was a famous street that we did our business on, and we did our commerce. And so there's so much history and so much legacy and so many estates that belong to us under the term Moor, which is why they want to get us out of that, right? Therefore, we don't see ourselves in world events. Now, anytime who has this knowledge and knows this knowledge, anytime the Palestinian Jewish issue come up, they would be able to see themselves and know, wait a minute, like, hey, before we even deal with that, why don't we deal with what happened to us as Moors? We have a place in this as well. And that's just over there. That's not even to deal with the Moorish history and legacy and inheritance in the theater of America.
That's deep. So I wanted to show this before I even get back into the Blue Bible, because this was part of the presentation. So the Holy Crusades, 1095, 1296. My father taught me that the acronym AD means after the death of Jesus. It wasn't until I went to prison that I learned that in Al-Islam time is counted from the day of Hijrah, which is in Roman time, July 16th, 622 AD. Until then, I had never realized the way I counted time was Christian. I didn't even, I just, for all I knew, we've been here 2,000 years. I don't know. The way I talked, think, and lived was all Greek, Roman, and Christian. I found out from my fellow convicts the so-called Crusades were called the Jihad in Africa. The Pope, now I always saw the Pope as the big Darth Vader, big bad guy, dominant guy of the Crusades. The Pope incited Europe's knights to fight in the Crusades with his sermons. Likewise, Africa's Caliph al-Hakim bi Amir Allah encouraged the Moors to initiate jihad. Now, here's the thing. Caliph al-Hakim, when he ordered them to destroy the Holy Sepulchre and all that, that was, like I said, 200 years before Saladin. You feel what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So they're trying to make it like they were the aggressors, and we defended and we were soft about it, and they came back and forth, and that's not the case. You know what I mean? This was our land, and we were kind of tripping on them at first, about what y'all doing in our land. Now, right here in the Blue Bible, make sure y'all get y'all copy. Go to cripjesus.com. Make sure y'all hit the like button and subscribe, y'all. This is my channel. This ain't Crumb. All right? Now, in 1017, he, talking about Al-Hakim, y'all, was deemed Allah in the flesh by Imam ad-Darazi. At the same time, he was Lord of the throne of Egypt, which made him the Lord of lords of the lands. In the eyes of the Fatimid, Jerusalem belonged to Egypt. Al-Hakim was culturally Ishmaeli and the father of the Druze religion that is still today. His grandparents built Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. He built Dar al-Ilm, the House of Knowledge in Cairo, Egypt. So it goes to show, while he did attack, while they did dominate, his position of power wasn't substantiated on violence. You get what I'm saying? It was bloodline, it was construction, it was things they did there, it was the culture of the area, it was the bloodlines of the time. He had all of that in one, to the point where they deemed him, Allah in the flesh. Now, another important thing.
Well, let me talk about that, because you're dealing with the Ishmaeli, and you have to really understand what the Ishmaeli is. The Ishmaeli it's almost like the root of all secret societies And here in the West, because you got to realize during the Crusades, the men of knowledge who realized, so you got to realize in Europe at this time, they're decrepit, they have leprosy, bubonic plague, all these things are going on. They have such a low quality of life. And so they're being told, hey, we're going to go fight the heathen. And then when they get over there, they see springs, they see water, they see regular people looking like what their popes and kings look like. So the men of knowledge and wisdom, they began secretly to become cryptic Muslims. And this developed a form of Muslim Freemasonry. This come out of the mysticism of the Ismailis, which was a sect of Shia that was very far from the mainstream. But when you study that, you begin to see that, you know, it was similar to, so the Ismailis, another word for the Ismailis is the assassins. All right. The word assassin comes from the Ismailis because they used to use, another word for them is Hashishians, which is where the word assassin comes from, because they used hashish rituals in their rituals when they would take people in their adept chamber and stuff and introduce them. So this was more like a Islamic order, right? Where you would say, so in the general Muslim kingdoms would probably not be recognizing him as Allah in the flesh. And then what that means is obviously something different, from a different take from it than what it may sound like on the surface. So just understanding where that's coming from, because when you're dealing with the Ismailis, you're dealing with a lot of their people came to power because of their ability to perform a lot of assassinations. So that's just some of the history to go with them there. But that being said, out of their mysticism and out of their chambers and out of their Darul Ilm and places like the Darul Hikmah, a lot of Freemasonic and mystic groups that still practice here in the West today, they trace their lineage back to them. So that's some facts about the Ismailis and that particular ruler. But that being said, in general, the jihads in general were it was the all of the kingdom coming together, you know, because of a common enemy at that particular time. And so yeah, just to add that on to the conversation.
Okay, let's bring him up. His persecution of Christians was significantly the precursor to the Crusades, as he not only forbade pilgrimage to the Holy Land, but also demolished the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem in 1009. However, it is worth noting that the Byzantines reconstructed the Basilica before the Crusades, which means that al-Hakim's actions cannot be seen as a direct cause of the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Hakim is an important figure in a number of Shia Ismaili sects, such as the world's 15 million Nizaris and the 1 to 2 million Musta'ilis, in addition to the 2 million Druze of the Levant. Okay, so it's about 20 million people still rocking with him. So he's one of the, so I would assume he got that title because he became one of the biggest figures out of that movement, right? Al-Hakim is a central figure in the history of the Druze religious sect, whose eponymous founder, Ad-Darazi, proclaimed him as the incarnation of God in 1018. Now, 100 years later, now the whole point of this was for, you know, that's why it's called Crip Jesus. It was for those that grew up like me, thinking that, man, we've been underneath their foot forever. You know, you can swing 100 fists at your brother, but you try to swing one at that Albion, you're going down. You know what I'm saying? The proof is in the history, right? This is for those of you that thought like I did. This is to show you that the Pope preaching his crusades wasn't until 100 years later, after Hakim had already smashed their sepulcher, made them pick up the trash and all of that. They were actually reacting to 100 years of assassins smoking weed and whipping their ass.
Pretty much.
1099, the first crusade captured the city of Jerusalem, killing everyone, a mixture of faiths, some 40,000 people. The Crusaders waded knee deep in blood, according to the chroniclers. Okay, so after that, Saladin responds. That's what I started the thing off. But a lot of people have to know that after the Fatimids, it was followed by the Ayyubids. So it didn't just fall off after them. There was a lot of internal struggle. It goes back to what we talked about yesterday when you said we look at this as the zenith, but this was actually the downfall of Islam. This was actually the end of the Moorish Empire that had been going for thousands and thousands of years. When you see the dynasties keep switching over, 100-year rule by this family, 100-year rule by this family, 200-year rule by this family. So this is when Saladin's family got a shot. You know, the Ayyubids found by Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyubid. And we see that little piece of land right there. So what needs to be understood is the Almoravids and the Almohads and all that were already going at this time. This is when the Egyptian people and all that started to change. This is when you get to what we call the pale face, as we call it now. This is why I argue with dudes all the time saying, man, what y'all don't understand is because y'all haven't got y'all history with the Prophet Noble Ali, peace and blessings upon him, was trying to show us is those are our people too, bro. Those of us, those are the proof of what happened. Those are our nephews and nieces. Word is bond. So
that's right.
We see right here Egyptian slavery. The people enslaved in Egypt during Islamic times mostly came from Europe and the Caucasus, referred to today as the white slaves, or this is for all y'all that hold on, you gotta stop thinking of absolutes, or the Sudan in Africa, south of the Sahara, through the trans-Saharan slave trade. These we refer to as black. So they didn't discriminate. They were enslaving, the people in power were enslaving people in Egypt. We have different caliphates right here, right? Now, this is how we get this blood. I think a lot of people get confused because they want to separate. Like we had the big old thing with Kevin Hart saying they're black and they saying they're not black. I tried to explain to dudes. I said, listen, bro, I've no bragging or nothing, but the blue guy gets around. I done had 2 Egyptian girlfriends, and they didn't look like me and you, but they damn sure didn't push white. You'll never get them to say they're white because they're not white.
That's right.
So
a lot of we think because people are pale that they automatically identify as white. It's us that really identify as white, but they don't. Some of them don't want to necessarily identify as so-called black either. Not because they don't know that we their fathers and their mothers, but because of our character and the way that we carry ourselves, and because of the respect that we have in the world.
I think also it denies your nationality. I know ever since I found out I was Gullah Geechee, I take pride in saying that, as opposed to just having to say, "Where are you? I'm black." I take pride in I'm Gullah Geechee. I'm a Mo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I just mean associated with the dark melanated hue, But when you start dealing with nationality and you carrying yourself in a cultural way, it's a totally different thing. It's like, oh yeah, we related. It's the people who are our children. When they see us behaving like mommy and daddy, they're willing to come over now and be the children, and actually be taught. That's one thing that I've noticed. I mean, it's each one teach one. There's things for us to learn because there's ancient traditions that are ancient traditions that many of the people who are now pale in those regions have been holding on to for us. It's our traditions, but they're preserving it right now. So some of that is being returned to us, but there's a certain resonance and a certain and there's a certain destiny that our people have that's in the prophecy that they know of. And a lot of times they just waiting for us to stand up and be our true selves.
Yes.
You can't be your true self without true knowledge of self. So when you look into the word more, you find so much so-called black history that you never learned in black history class that you have to start to wonder, well, it seems to be that the only reason this information is excluded is because of its relationship to Islam. And the only people who are really scared of Islam are the Europeans and those people that follow his ideology, because Islam has never done anything, and I'm not talking about Arab Zionism, But Islam has never done anything but elevated a people to the level of rulers. You study history, every time the Holy Quran and Islam came to a people, they could have been desert Arabs, but they rose to the height of kings. So with a track record like that, why wouldn't you want to be? There has to be some other reason, and that has to do with a lot of mental slavery and those who continue to sell us out.
100%. So right here on page 48 of your blue Bibles, we break down and go further.
I got about maybe 10 more minutes, Mo.
Okay. So I put here, the Muslim lord Yaqub al-Mansur enslaved millions of Christians during the Crusades. The captives he took were chained and shipped to Africa. Once there, they were bought and sold as part of the African slave trade. They are the first African slaves. The word slave was derived from their ethnicity, Slavic.
That's right.
Now,
yes, indeed.
Here's the trick. How did they go from being the first to this whole mix-up? So this is why I brought this. I think the Mamelukes, although they're focused in Egypt, they're a good example of what happened to this concept here, because we're not racial, so we didn't look at it like that. So Mameluke is a member of a regime that formerly ruled parts of the Middle East, descended from slaves. They ruled Syria 1260 to 1516 and Egypt 1250 to 1517, and continued as a ruling military caste in Ottoman Egypt until massacred by the Viceroy Muhammad Ali in 1811. So before you go, I think the main simple thing I was trying to point out to people is we got to ask ourselves, if these people were being shipped in to Africa as slaves for centuries, where'd they go? The thing is, they use the movies and the TV screen. So as soon as I say African slave, you don't think of it as a geographical thing, as a servant in Africa. You think of a Moor. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And I'm showing that I'm not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, African slave, but why does that have to be a Moor? The first African slaves were Slavic people. In Africa.
This is true. And we have to realize that, again, we're coming to the end of the Moorish Empire when you're dealing with the 12, 13, 1400s. And so what happens is this. There's always been a Black Sea slave trade since the time of Herodotus, and he talks about this. And there's some things I wanted to go into. Maybe another session we'll go into it. But suffice it to say that from the Slavs to the Caucasoids, this is the beginning and the origin of slavery. This is and it was carried on for thousands of years. Now, when the Moors at this particular point in time, 12, 1100s, 1300s, begin to come into power, the earlier than that, but then around this time, you still have Moors in power because the last stronghold is not until Granada, but that's when we're starting to have issues in the kingdom. So we begin to inherit these various ancient slave trades because it's now our time in power. And so our test and what we did, again, had a lot of relationship on why the European decided to just enslave us exclusively. And so this comes about, but before that, you're talking about, say, maybe when the Turks finally got in control of Europe, this is when the Black Sea slave trade really ended, right?
Yeah.
Then, so we were more, because when you're dealing with the Turks, that's misleading too, because the Turks at that time were not all pale-faced as well, but you were dealing with a multinational government, many of whom were dark. So this concept of us just running this slavery and doing it the way that people portray it is something that kind of was thrust upon us by us coming into power. Now, we didn't do the right thing, And like it tells you in chapter 47, through sin and disobedience, every nation suffers slavery due to the fact that they honor not the creed and principles of their forefathers. And in our case, we strayed after the strange gods of Europe of whom we knew nothing. We started imitating and adopting the European ways, and part of that was this system of slavery. And we did a lot of terrible things. And as a result, when the European came into power, all that he did was do what we taught him to do. Now, he did establish it. Ours was not a perpetual. It wasn't chattel. It wasn't the way that they did it. They took it to another level. But our hands were not necessarily clean in the matter of slavery. So this is very important for our people to begin to understand that our fall and our issues were, in a sense, a result of some of our karmic debt that we had to deal with. But that era is now over, and it's been over for a long time. But we're still mentally enslaved and still afraid to come outside of the mentality and outside of the religion that was created by their people for their salvation. There's no salvation in it for us. Never has been and never will be. There may be salvation in the faith in general because we practice these faiths. We're the founders of these faiths. But the faith, the structure, the way that they gave it to us, and how they used it to indoctrinate us and enslave us, it's never going to work for us. It's diametrically opposed to our freedom, and we need to begin to investigate our ancient culture, our ancient history, especially Islam, whether one wants to be a Muslim or not. This is the sole force after Egyptian religion, which Islam is a culmination of Egyptian religion, that have been opposing the domination of Roman Christian ways, which are in these days aren't even Christian ways. You know, it's been this same fight from Egypt. It was the Christian religion that was competing with the Egyptian religion, and the Egyptian religion lost. Christianity came about. But what rose up and has been opposing it ever since, and has been the main force of being able to keep it in check so that the whole world is not under the system, and that's Islam. And many people say that Islam was a result of us becoming enslaved. This is true in part when you're dealing with the Arab Zionist aspect. But another aspect that they forget or probably don't know is that it also became a main factor in freeing us. Like you said, in the East, we didn't call it crusades, we called it jihads. So when you deal with all of these, what they call in the West slave rebellions, they were actually jihads of the plantation. And there's a good book called Jihads of the Plantation. And even when you look at Haiti, you never hear about the Islamic influence on Dazaline and Toussaint L'Ouverture and the Moors over there that actually, kicked off the revolution. So these are parts that are hidden, and they're hidden because the European knows that once we begin to know this history and we see what fixed our problem in the past and what gave us nobility in the past and what style of government we were able to use, no matter what tribe we came from. We all have tribal customs. I don't care if you Fulani, Yoruba, Crip, Blood. Those are your tribal customs. But we have to be able to come together under universal customs. And that's what Moor is. Moor, no matter what tribe you're from, Moor is a nationality. That means that's where we come to build our nation. And when we're building a nation, we have universal customs that we respect when we with our nation. And we can practice what the customs we practice when we back with our tribes. And once we know that, then we'll be able to actually rise the way that we're supposed to. We're rising already. But believe me, they say we couldn't rise, and that once the kingdom falls, that it never will rise again. Well, we were sent to prophet. And prophets are salvage nations. And see, that's the difference. We were sent to prophet in the sense of, not in the ecclesiastical sense of Nabi, but in the sense of Rasul, social reformer, that could come and bring us and reform our society. And this is and that was Noble Jew Ali. And this relates to the prophecy of us coming back into the true knowledge of ourselves and returning back to our vine and fig tree.
100%. I want to show the people we like to deal a lot with what's popular in the European culture, but there was actually empires, like the brother was saying, the whole time Islam was up and popping, that were thriving, that we were escaping to, thriving within, all the way up to the year 1900, all the way from the year 800. 800, y'all. That's damn near 2,000 years. Here goes the Canaan Empire, also known as the Bornu Kingdom, the Canaan Bornu Empire, major Moorish Empire, almost never mentioned. Y'all might know it as Chad. If you type in Chad in your computer, it usually pops up. Let me share the screen. As a matter of fact, hold on. So right there, you'll see it says, the Canaan Bornu Empire existed in areas which are now part of Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, Libya, and Chad. It was known to the Arabian geographers as the Canaan Empire from the 8th century AD onward, and lasted as the independent kingdom of Bornu, the Bornu Empire, until 1900. Okay, so this was a source of wealth, of networking, of unity, of a common language, like how we use English, how they use Arabic, of trade, of unifying different nations and cultures. Islam was all of that, you know. But more so than that, like I said, white slaves in Morocco, what you'll see here is they basically attempt to erase that, because they want to put it in your mind that they own everything. It doesn't matter where they come from, and you own nothing. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you do your ancestry.com and find out you're Hawaiian and this, that, and other, you still say, well, I'm black. It doesn't matter if you find out they're Swedish, part African slave white, part Turkish, you still say, well, he's white. He got that coming. And it's just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here to break out of that.
Right.
So
Yes,
right here in page 48, and I'm going to let you go. Page 48, I want to show in 1798, the French general Napoleon shot the nose off the Sphinx in Egypt during the Battle of the Pyramids. This represented the freeing of the slave people through the American Revolution and French Revolution. Before the revolutions, the people we now call white were slaves. So before those revolutions, the people we now look to as white were the slave people. And I'll go back here to show this, so y'all can catch on to what was going on. Because I want to leave too. I have more, but I don't want to get too deep. I want the people to chew on this. We just gave
Yeah,
it, right?
I told the fam an hour, so they
okay,
giving me
I'm
my
about to go.
space, but I got to get back to them.
Y'all see here that the Mamelukes came into power 3 times. This is not an absolute simple story like that. These people were our slaves, and they found a way to use politics, because we were never slave masters. We don't even understand their concept of slice your penis off, kill off your whole family, you're in perpetual. We don't even think like that, y'all. We still don't think like that. We still hang around the Albions and don't have a urge in our gut and heart to do all these evil things to them. We don't think like that. So while they were under us and we were treating them fair, letting them be military, they actually came to power in the 1200s, from 1260 to 1516. Okay, then in Egypt from 1250 to 1517. Well, then the Ottomans came, took them out, but they were still in power. They just had to pay respect to the Ottomans. They were still ruling in a de facto way. Well, during these in the beginning of the 1800s, when they shot the nose off the Sphinx, what I'm trying to show y'all is Napoleon came in, and even after he left and Muhammad Ali got him out of there, these people were still down. Because when Napoleon was there, he was with them, because they were pushing the racial concept. The introduction of the whole racial concept they came with in the 1800s after they had their little revolutions, we still wasn't thinking like that. We were still mixing with them. We were still enslaving some of our own brothers against them, thinking like, oh, I'm a Crip. Well, he's a blood. Oh, you're a police officer. I ain't tripping. Let's go kill them together. This dumb type of thinking. This is where it all got mixed up. You see, and this is where you see the fall happen right here, you know. And you see in the Blue Bible, in that same time period, you see he had to massacre them in 1811, right? Okay, Napoleon was already gone. So right here in 1801, U.S. President Jefferson refuses to pay his landlord, Yusuf Karamali. Why were the first presidents of the U.S. paying rent, basically, to the Moorish rulers. You see what I'm saying? So this dominance we had was still going, right? That same year, Napoleon refused to recognize the sovereignty of the people of Haiti after the French Revolution. As a result, Napoleon's soldiers were forced out of the Americas in 1803. To retaliate against the Creole people, Jefferson and Napoleon orchestrated a deal known as the Louisiana Purchase. So once again, Mo, it just shows the paper genocide, the mental genocide, brainwashing. We were in wars with these people. Some of our grandparents were in wars, and we don't believe it. We pick up a pipe, light it up, and say, "I've never been nothing." That easy.
Yeah.
That easy, Mo.
That's right.
So I give
That's
all
right, man.
praise.
And you know, like I'm glad you said that's easy, because a lot of Moors these days, it's all about the knowledge. It's all about the knowledge, and the knowledge comes first. But then after you have the knowledge, you have to act. And that means you get with your nation. It's not about just proclaiming individually and being individual Moors. It's you proclaim and you accept your society, you accept your nation, but your nation got to accept you back. It's a mutual relationship. You got the bloodline, yeah, but that don't mean that you're a part of your nation. See, I could be Chinese living right here in Hawaii. That doesn't mean that I'm linked with the Chinese government. That doesn't mean that I have any rights or responsibilities towards the Chinese government. So what we want is the rights all the time, but we don't want none of the responsibilities. And the rights and responsibilities come hand in hand because it's a social compact. You can't have a social compact or social contract if you're an individual. Individual and socials diametrically opposed to one another. So it's about us getting back with another synonym for nation is society. We have to get with our societies and move as one. This is what the knowledge is for. Not just to have it and sit up and play, be the God of knowledge. No, this is about taking this knowledge, applying this knowledge, helping to uplift our people. And we're just dealing with the knowledge of the history right now. More science, very heavy on the components of self-development, character development, because you can't rebuild anything with this mentality that the European have given us right now. We have to return it, not just the religion, the customs, the thinking, the dress, all of it. We have to give it all back and find value in what we have. And then when we do that, we're ready to move as one. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We got to work and do it while we're on the move, but we have to do it nevertheless.
I agree 100%. I couldn't agree more, man, because that's exactly the point. With these computers, is giving us a scapegoat to sit in the room and be the God of knowledge and complain all day and act like you're doing something. But that's not what we're here for. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me, Mo? You still can't hear me? Okay, it might have been yours. But the point is, though, like you said, the knowledge is only first. You know what I mean? That's only till you'll know, so you're not just running rebel without a cause, as we see today.
Right.
But it's not for you to sit there and hide behind the computer screen and be, like you said, the God of knowledge, just sitting in the house complaining all day, acting like you're doing something by complaining. Let's step it up, y'all. I want to thank you so much for bringing us this justice. And y'all can find me. Well, let the people know where they can find you at, Mo.
All right, beloved. I want to again extend infinite gratitude to you and all brothers and sisters that have platforms like this, big and small. It doesn't matter to me, large or small, because the flock know their shepherd's voice, Islam. And so I can be reached primarily on Instagram, Cozmo, Cozmoel. I'm the Minister of Culture, Grand Sheik of Moorish Science Temple of America, California, Oakland Temple #1, Grand Sheik of Governor of Moorish Science Temple of America, Hawaii. And also we have our charity, Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc., which supports all of our works. So you can catch me on Instagram also. Insofar as my literature, you can go on Amazon. Go to Amazon Books, or you can go to a bookstore also known as DTR 360. That's online as well. and look up Cozmo Ill or Moors, and you should be able to find me there. I'm accessible. Just DM me on my Instagram and whatnot, and we can build.
That's peace. That's peace. And just in case y'all didn't know, y'all can find me everywhere. But if y'all need some more details, you can Google the word Crip Jesus. You can go to the website, cripjesus.com. I need y'all to pull up, man. I've been noticing the website slowing down a little bit. What's going on with y'all? Pull up. The Black Illuminati is up and active, man, more than ever. And please don't hesitate. Get your copy of the Blue Bible. Everybody and their mama got it, literally. I mean, well, we're trying to get it like that. I ain't gonna lie. Everybody and their mama ain't got it yet. But we need it to where you walk right up the street and be like, man, you got that Blue Bible? What that say? Man, no, I ain't say that. We're trying to raise the vibration level of the people. Give them some different type of conversations. You feel me? And with that being said, Islam Mo, I thank you so much. I know we went over the time. I didn't even think we was gonna go this long, but the bill was so beautiful. And you got to come back, man, because I'm already thinking about 10 more things to delve into just from that one. So peace. Thank you so much. This was a dream come true.
Allah, my brother.
Yes,
much
sir.
appreciation. Praise be to Allah. I trust we meet again. Peace and love to you and your viewers.
Islam.
Now you got motherfucker born in their own native land and don't got nothing coming to them. You born in debt. They call it money. You born in debt. You need money to get, you get what I'm saying? You're not born in a world where, okay, you got land, this and that and other, but no one can even imagine it now, but once upon a time you were, everybody was rich. Right. Everybody was born into a nation.
I know y'all think I was gonna let y'all leave that easy. Hold on, hell no. Now that we got the brother gone, what y'all gonna have y'all really been reading y'all Blue Bibles? Because I talked about that all up in here. Now hold on. Let me go back to y'all lucky y'all didn't skip. I was about to give y'all some homework. Hold on. No. I'm about to give it to y'all. Give me 30 of them Crumb TV seconds. Y'all know how we do the ding, 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 ding. Yeah, give me some of that real quick. Page 101. Page 101 of your Blue Bible. Go to page 101 of your Blue Bible. Okay? Go to page 101 of your Blue Bible. It says, if you want to know, man, what he talk about some white slaves? He didn't even give no proof, no times, no dates. No, the brother was building. I didn't want to cut him off, and I was kind of, you know what I mean? I'm working on the index right now. I'm putting together the index right now. Y'all dealing with me in real time. So the Blue Bible index is done now. If you got one without an index, contact me and I'll hook you up. But the Blue Bible index is done now, and page 101 gives the science of this. And it says, we are taught to believe that all people labeled black in the U.S. are wearing slave names, or they are descendants of African slaves. They are denied birthrights to North America. They are denied inheritance to its property. 66.6% of the Caucasians imported by the Freemasons to create the United States were slaves from Africa. In Europe, they had no land, property, or birthrights. When they arrived in America, all they had was a promise that if they spoke English, practiced Christianity, and claimed to be white, they could be part of the New World Order. That's true. If you don't believe me, look up the word manifest destiny. I talk about that in here. They eventually settled in the Appalachian Mountains, where they became hillbillies. They adopted the flag and ways of the original people, at which point they earned the name redneck and the Confederate flag. That's not their flag. That's the flag of the indigenous people, a confederacy of Indian tribes. Well, not Indian tribes, because Indians are the ones that joined with them. That's a confederation of original tribes. They got that flag from us. They are descendants of a slave people. Yes. You got that? Okay. At the same time, 85% of the people labeled black by the United States had land, property, and birthrights when the English arrived. Only 10% of our ancestors were African slaves. As a whole, we are collectively Creole. All of this has been lost to the racist practice of eugenics. The first people labeled white married into the nations of North America and enslaved their own children. The plantations they built were sex farms, breeding grounds, where they used eugenics to create slaves. This was their way of civilizing people. All nations that refused to be civilized were labeled black. The lands of the so-called black nations were given away after the Civil War to create the New World Order. This is page 102 of your blue Bible. Daniel Freeman was the first member of the white nation to claim 160 acres of our land by way of the Homestead Act of 1862. If your copy says 1865, that is a typo. I apologize. Contact me. We will get you new versions of the blue Bible. We out here really winning, y'all. We making new versions. We finna be around the world. This was after Abraham Lincoln attempted to deport our people out of America. Our names were given away after the Dow Rose Act in 1892. And there you have it. That's how they did it, right on paper. Created a so-called slave. But the truth is, we still in Morocco.